Hello and welcome to the Dissect and Connect podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wade. This is the podcast where we explore population health issues impacting your community. The Dissect and Connect podcast is a service of Montgomery County Prevention Partners and New River Valley Community Services. Our podcast is made possible through a grant from Carilion Clinic. The views expressed in this podcast may not necessarily reflect the views of Carilion Clinic. Sarah Wilson has worked for NAMI Virginia since 2009, after first interning with the organization. Since that time, Sarah has served in a variety of roles with NAMI Virginia, including Director of Adult and Family Programs, Director of Children and Youth Programs, and Director of Events and Outreach. It's fair to say that Sarah has had her hand in almost every aspect of the organization. In 2018, she was named NAMI Virginia's Assistant Director. Sarah received her Master's in Social Work, Administration Planning, and Policy Practice from Virginia Commonwealth University. She has a certificate in nonprofit management from VCU's L. Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs and has her certificate in volunteer administration from the Council for Certification in Volunteer Administration. Sarah completed the Emerging Nonprofit Leadership Program through VCU and the Partnership for Nonprofit Excellence in 2012. Sarah also happens to be a longtime friend and former employee of New River Valley Community Services. Prior to joining NAMI Virginia, Sarah, whose maiden name is Eisenman, served as manager of the Raft Crisis Hotline from June 2005 through July 2007. So Sarah, welcome to the Dissect and Connect podcast.
Hi, Mike. It's nice to be here.
Great to talk to you. It's been a long time.
Yes, it really has. I always mean to stop by when I'm in the area, and I think I definitely should. I think there's still some folks at NRVCS that might know me, and I'd get a smile to see and hope they'd like to see me too.
Absolutely. You should stop by sometime when you have a chance. Well, hey, as we get started with the interview, I'm going to jump in and just ask you the question that I'm asking of all of our guests recently, and that is, how have you been personally impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Personally, who hasn't been impacted?
Right.
It's been life-altering, and it's so hard to sort of want to talk about. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to talk about how it's impacting you when you know it's impacting some other people so much harder. Obviously, as a social person, it's hard to be at home, but I have my own home. I have access to Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
I have a job that can lend itself to remote work, which is wonderful. But it's been hard worrying about family with health issues. It's been hard worrying about the people that we serve and, the impact all of this is having on people's structure in their lives, the resources, the coping strategies they rely on. But it's just been a surreal experience. And, I just try to remind myself that I'm sure I'm going to learn something from this experience, and I'll look back on it and feel like I had that valuable lesson. But it's been a challenge with exciting opportunities, especially moving online. I think
Right.
NAMI had been holding out on online programming, and now we're really starting to embrace that as a real viable means for programming as well as awareness raising and communication.
Yeah. For those who are listening who maybe are not familiar with NAMI and the Virginia chapter, can you talk a little bit more about the organization, its mission, and then maybe some of your key programs?
Sure. So NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. We're very proud of that grassroots heritage. We started as a local initiative with families and individuals coming together for mental health support and mental health advocacy in local communities. And we've grown tremendously over the years, and we now have a national office, state offices, and countless local chapters. Here in Virginia, we have 14 local affiliates, one actually being in your backyard in New River Valley,
Right.
Serving the same counties and cities as the CSB.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission is around promoting mental health, resiliency, and recovery. And we primarily do that through support, education, and advocacy. And we do that because we kind of see the journey of living well, either with a mental health diagnosis or as a loved one of someone with a mental health diagnosis, really goes through getting that support.
Mm-hmm.
information, and then feeling empowered to be an advocate for yourself and for others. And, we know no one expects mental health to hit their life or to hit someone they love. And it's important to kind of make sure you don't isolate when that happens.
Right.
So that's kind of the overview of NAMI. Most of our effort is really done through peer support and peer education. We really think there's strength in that lived experience of having had a mental health condition or supported somebody and helping other people navigate their journey. And so all of our support and education programs are peer-led. They're provided by community volunteers for free. And, we try to make sure that we have those available in every community. And now that online programming is available, we really are able to reach those that really can't come to us, which is really exciting for us.
And, in being in this field for about 20 years now, as you and I were talking before we started the interview, to go back and think about the evolution of peer services and how they've been integrated into the overall system of care, as I think back on it, NAMI was kind of at the forefront in really promoting that as an option for treatment and recovery.
Right. I mean, there's a famous saying that nothing about us without us. And NAMI's always realized that, mental health recovery has to be a partnership between the individual and their treatment team. And, their family is part of your treatment team. And, making sure that they're part of the conversation, they're empowered to be aware of what they need and what they can bring to the table. And, we've always known there's something special there. It offers coping strategies that traditional or therapeutic services don't always know. It offers that hope that's incredibly important when things aren't going right, that you can make it the next day, that in a couple days, a couple months, things will be better than they are today. And just to really feel heard.
Yeah, and going back to COVID-19, and I've had this conversation with some other guests on the podcast in previous episodes, but, you talk about the support of folks who have lived experience and just being able to connect with folks like that in a time when, for the last couple of months, we've all had to stay at home and be socially distanced from one another. I wonder if you maybe could speak to some of the primary concerns around mental health that NAMI has in regard to the pandemic and maybe the aftermath of what we're currently going through.
I mean, it's, experts have made their estimates, but, we're all still waiting to see what will happen. But it's pretty clear that something this altering to our livelihoods for some, for our health, for our family dynamics, they're predicting that there's going to be significant upticks in anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, domestic violence, and unfortunately, suicide. And, what most experts are saying is that, it's sort of a shadow epidemic, and that as we kind of continue to deal with COVID and the aftermath, that'll continue to put strains on our abilities to cope with these issues, and that, the real key is we just need to be checking in on each other and checking in on ourselves, and attending to our mental wellness. We talk about mental health being a lot like physical health. There's, Olympic athletes and there's couch potatoes, and, we run the gamut of really wanting to attend where we fall and moving us in one direction or the other. And, a lot of our pushes is that people need to be keeping in mind how they're feeling and what's going on with other loved ones, and making sure that they know where resources are.
Right.
And, we have a lot of information on our website. We have a lot of information on our Facebook page, and it's just important to kind of know the warning signs for someone that's starting to have mental distress, somebody that's maybe more in an acute state, and knowing where to find them help. But for the majority of us, it's really just about managing our mental health. I saw a cute post the other day that said, check in with yourself as much as you check in with social media. And I don't really follow that rule because part of my self-care has been around not being on social media as much. But I think it's always an important reminder to be sort of attending to yourself and doing a scan and seeing how you're feeling and making sure you have people that are available to help you, even if they're informal supports, not necessarily traditional therapists, but knowing where you can find help.
It sounds like from what I've seen and heard that some folks are turning to alcohol and other substances, unfortunately, to cope with some of the stressors and some of the mental health ramifications of the pandemic. Is that something that's on NAMI's radar?
Yes. I mean, there's an array of coping strategies, and, we're always encouraging coping strategies that are a little bit more healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to remember what's good for you, not just what feels good, and adding in a few coping strategies that are going to help you sort of get where you need to be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And so, not saying that any one coping strategy is bad. We all kind of have to do what we need to do at times, but reaching out for help. We've got a tremendous amount of online support groups that are free. There's an array of online opportunities to focus on your wellness, take classes, connect with others. That's just something that we've been really pushing. I guess I want to just remind our audience, in other health crises like this, and just for example, the heat waves in the Midwest, in the 70s, it wasn't necessarily always our most vulnerable groups that were succumbing to heat stroke, the old, the young. It was the people that didn't have any social support because no one was seeing what was happening and helping them find support. So I think the key is, even though we have the physical distance, it's important to make sure you're keeping your social networks. And, if you haven't heard from someone that's in your social network, normally to be reaching out to them and checking on them.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the online resources, because there truly are an endless amount of opportunities to get connected to a support group, an exercise class, meditation group. I mean, there's all kinds of things out there. My inbox seems to be flooded every day with free resources and information, education tools to specifically help folks deal with the pandemic and the repercussions of that. So if you're not picking up on the fact that there are tons of resources out there, you're just not paying attention, because there truly are lots of things out there that you can do in a healthy, constructive, productive way to help yourself get through this. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, and there's also a lot of great free apps if, you're more of maybe a solo self-care, or you'd like to start there. I kind of realized COVID's encouraged all of us to, have to embrace online activities more than maybe we would have historically wanted to do. But, there's wonderful mindfulness apps out there that can be downloaded, and other resources that can help you.
Do you have any in particular that... I'm sorry.
Yeah, I use one in particular, but I hate to just offer one example because there's many out there, but I use Calm, which has been really good for just short-term mindfulness guided activities, which is all I need. I kind of need someone to talk at me and sort of remind me to breathe and take time. But there are tons out there, and some are free, some you pay a little bit of money for a few more options, but just some really great resources if you're willing to kind of give it a try.
Right. So Sarah, even though you and I have known each other for a long time, I don't think I've ever asked you this question, so I'm going to do it now. Why did you choose this as a field, as a career?
Well, it's a great question, Mike. So, growing up, I had kind of an interesting dichotomy in my family, in the sense that my dad had a physical health condition. He had type 1 diabetes. He's had it his whole life since he was an adolescent, and he managed it relatively well, but not great. And sometimes he would forget to eat, forget to use insulin, and he would decompensate and be belligerent and be scary and intimidating. And, it was always such a wonderful thing to be able to call the rescue squad and have them come and give him insulin for free.
Mm-hmm.
That worked almost instantly, and he was back to normal. I mean, that was huge. It was a very scary thing. And
Right.
At a certain period in my life, my mom struggled with depression,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't really have the same options. I kind of saw my family not talk about it. I saw her have to deal with it in isolation. And I just thought that was so unfair, that there was no quick, fast treatment
Mm-hmm.
that was affordable, that was just an inherent right to have. I know the brain is a very complex organ. We still don't have it figured out. There's many reasons why we can't fix mental health issues immediately. But I just hated the way they were so differently responded to and treated. And I just didn't think that was fair. And so I got into mental health kind of on that. I actually volunteered at the CSB, New River Valley Community Services, in their RAP helpline, and really found that to be a great outlet for supporting others and learning more about what resources were out there. And, I just kind of realized that mental health was where I wanted to go. I felt like it needed more champions. And I love NAMI because since we started in the late 70s, we've sort of used where there's a will, there's a way mentality of, I survive this, I want to help you survive this, and I want to make other people have an easier journey. And so just using that lived experience to connect with others and help build that network of support, that confidence, has been incredibly moving for me. And even today, I mean, I've been with NAMI long enough that I've seen the push for online programming for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of a holdout because I felt like there was still so much you could get from meeting other people.
Right.
We're still important because, there's so much information on the internet. You can find anything you want on mental health there. But to really understand how to live successfully as having identity as being an individual and someone with a mental health condition, or being an individual and a family member, maybe full-time family member of someone with a serious chronic mental illness, is sort of hard. How do you be a proud advocate but also respect their boundaries? And you almost can't figure that out without interacting with your peers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm finding we can do a lot of that online, but I was a holdout for a long time thinking we really needed to still do it in person. But it's that connection that's so important, and that chance to see your peer.
I really appreciate you sharing that. As I said, I've known you for a long time, but hadn't heard your backstory, so to speak. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, if anybody remembers Terry Grimes, she was also a huge reason I went into getting a secondary degree, because, she was such a mental health advocate in the River Valley community. And, just hearing her story and her experiences, and, it made me realize that our family situation wasn't unique.
Right.
That the mental health system needed a little more help.
Yeah, Terry was a great champion for mental health, and was really a pioneer in advocacy. Let's talk about the ongoing situation around social unrest, some of the issues that we've seen around racial injustice, and how that might impact our communities from a mental health standpoint. It's sort of a broad topic, I understand, but I was wondering if you might have some insight or thoughts about what we're seeing right now, and maybe how that might impact things moving forward.
Sure. This is a big issue, and it's been a big issue for years. And, we're, I think, still as an organization and an office sort of unpacking our feelings around it, our needs. But, this really gets at trauma.
Yeah.
Community violence is directly correlated to trauma. Systemic oppression is connected to trauma, and trauma is incredibly negative for physical and mental health. This is really just a no-brainer. It's a bad outcome for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that needs to be addressed, but it's, by the nature of being systemic, is going to be a big operation to unpack. But I mean, I think the key is that our communities need to be recognizing that this is traumatizing, that, approaches need to be trauma informed,
mm-hmm.
and that it's going to take time, and that patience and perseverance is really necessary. And again, connection. We have to be able to talk about this. We have to have safe conversations to move us forward.
Absolutely.
So I don't know that I can say much more than that, except that, NAMI 100% sees how horribly harmful a lot of what our people of color in this nation are going through. And, we hope to be doing more. We certainly, know there's more that needs to be done.
And, in the here and now of what's going on, and the immediacy of the footage that we see on the news and what's being shared on social media, we see the immediate violence, but what we don't really stop to consider is that long-term impact of the trauma that's happening right before our eyes almost every night.
I can't speak to all the long-term impacts, except that, repeated long-term experiences of oppression, systemic oppression, community violence, they're going to lead to negative physical and mental health outcomes around life expectancy, health issues. I mean, a lot of post-traumatic health disorders. I mean, it's going to have a lot of impact on our human services field.
Absolutely.
Because, your body can't, it internalizes a lot of that stress. Fight, flight, or freeze is something that, that all of those cause on a daily basis. And I'm not saying that not everybody deals with trauma, but the more trauma you deal with, the more baggage there's going to be. And I think our system needs to sort of be prepared to support the services that are going to help people work through those.
Yeah, I mean, between the pandemic and what's going on with race relations, coming out of both of those at the same time, it certainly sounds like the makings of a perfect storm, for lack of a better term.
Yes, I mean, it is a little frightful, and which is why a lot of what we've been focusing is proactively. I mean, is prevention.
Sure.
Or at least mitigation. Check in on your people. Make sure the people in your networks are okay. Make sure that they have someone to talk to. Make sure that they're doing what they need to do to take care of themselves, because this is going to have a ripple and long-term impact. And we're only, we've got these estimates of what could happen, but we don't quite have the solutions to solve them yet. And at least I haven't seen that as a state response, although I know people are working towards it. But I think what it has told me is that everybody needs to kind of own their own responsibility and trying to check in on themselves, and also check in on the people around them.
Absolutely. Great advice. Anything from the legislative standpoint that NAMI's focusing on in the next few months or year?
We had a very good General Assembly session this January.
Mm-hmm.
The budget was very good for mental health. The policies were going to be really great, especially I think through the CSBs in terms of same-day access and a lot of the services they were going to fund. I think the pandemic has sort of, in some ways, slowed the ability of that to really roll out as intended.
Mm-hmm.
But, in terms of advocacy, honestly, I don't know the answer, Mike. We haven't even quite thought about our next strategy of advocacy, because it's been such an interesting spring.
I mean, yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, one of the things we're hoping for, and we haven't quite learned the answer, is, we really want to see telehealth continue to be an option.
Yeah.
I think that state funding will probably continue to support it. I hope private insurers will continue. I think mental health parity in insurance is going to be huge, and I know it's supposed to be there, but we really need the state to enforce it.
Right.
A lot of insurance companies aren't actually providing a lot of in-system coverage and or any options in-house. So, I think really forcing the state to monitor that a little bit closer is something that has been on our radar, but given everything that's coming is probably going to be something that we will probably push closer to one of our top priorities.
Getting toward the end of our conversation, so I wanted to see if maybe you had, in addition to what we've already talked about, a resource, a book, a website, something that you would recommend to folks who maybe are trying to struggle to come to terms with mental health, maybe their own mental health or the mental health of a loved one?
I should be prepared for that. If you're having that kind of question, I don't have a book and I don't have a website, but I would just encourage you to reach out to our helpline. We're not able to answer the lines live right now because of our remoteness, but we are checking it frequently. And, you can call our state office helpline. You can call a local chapter's helpline. But, we've all got some connection. We'd love to just be an empathetic ear. We'd love to make some referrals, just help you sort of process that. Because, again, I think connection is important. So, feel free to reach out if you need us.
Great. And I'll include information about that in our show notes today.
Perfect.
Any parting word of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience, Sarah?
I think I said it earlier, but it's a good reminder. Just check in with yourself as much as you're checking in with social media.
I like that.
You know you best. And, if you feel like something's a little off, if you don't know where else to start, give us a call.
Great. And for folks that want to get in touch with NAMI Virginia, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Our main number is 804-285-8264.
Great. I'll also include that in the show notes for today's episode.
Perfect. And let me also share one other number that would probably be even better for folks in your community.
Sure.
Which is our NAMI Newer Valley's helpline number. And it's 540-585-1627. And I just want to prepare everybody. I don't think that they man this line every second, but somebody is checking it daily. So if you can just leave a message, they'll call you back. The local community chapter is also offering online family support groups to anybody that'd like to join. And they also can do... They are trained to do our Mental Health 101 presentations, which is a good introduction and sort of awareness raising that's great for any small group. So if anybody's interested in something like that, you can reach out to them for a little bit more information on it.
That's great to know, Sarah. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Mike, it's a pleasure to catch up with you. I mean, I had such a great time working with Newer Valley Community Services and working with the RAF team and the Access team, and you especially. You were a big ally for me at the time.
Well, it was definitely my pleasure to work with you, and it's been great to catch up after all these years. I mean, it's been, 12, 13 years since we've spoken, so it's nice to catch up in this platform, but hopefully, you'll make your rounds and get back to Blacksburg at some point and stop by and say hello in person.
I'm definitely there at least once a year, and I will certainly make sure to stop by and say hi.
Sounds like a plan. Sarah, thanks again for being on the show. We really appreciate the information that you've shared and look forward to talking to you again soon.
My pleasure. All right. Thank you, Mike.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dissect and Connect podcast. To learn more about Montgomery County Prevention Partners or New River Valley Community Services, be sure to check us out on Facebook or visit nrvcs.org/podcast.